to another episode of LVP Conversations. Today we have Betsy Bizarro with us, and we're so excited to hear her story and just be able to have a conversation with her. So thank you so much, Betsy, for being here with us today.
Thank you for asking me, Anjali. I grew up mostly in Plymouth County. I've lived all of my life except for about 6 months in Massachusetts. I've lived in Western Massachusetts since 1969. I am someone who loves nature, which getting my majoring in environmental studies was just right up my alley. And I live in a very rural area of Western Massachusetts in Franklin County. I had a traumatic brain injury when I was 15, but which was in 14 rather, which was in 1965. And they didn't call it a traumatic brain injury. They called it a traumatic vision disorder because after, I fell and knocked my head in several different places and was unconscious for a while. My vision was completely altered to the point where I had 20/15 vision, and then I had to get glasses, prescription glasses. But they didn't call it that then, but I'm sure that, now they might call that, my first traumatic brain injury. My traumatic brain injury that I had on April Fool's Day of 2019, you get a laugh, April Fool's Day. I blacked out. They say it was a negative drug interaction, and I don't remember it. The last thing I remember was, trying to use the hall wall to hold myself up. And when I came to, I was on the floor and didn't know where I was. And I was all sticky. I had cut the back of my head, and I couldn't get up. I fractured my pelvis for, I don't know if it was the third or fourth time. And I called 911, and they took me first to Greenfield, but they didn't have a neurology department that could handle that. So then they had to take me by ambulance to Springfield, Bay State Medical. And they said I had, they had to do 3 stitches on the back of my head. And I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage and a subdural hemorrhage. And they kept me overnight. They said it wasn't anything that they could operate on. It wasn't a place they could operate it. So luckily it stopped bleeding, and they sent me home. And then in September of 2019, I had a bad fall and got another concussion. And then almost 4 weeks later in October, I had another bad fall and got another concussion. In April, that was the 8th time I'd been knocked unconscious. After October, that was my 18th concussion. Neurologist that they sent me to in Springfield that specialized in traumatic brain disorders, he said because of my age and that I'd had so many that I might not come all the way back. All the other times I came back, my brain went back to normal. This time it hasn't. My psychotherapist suggested I connect with the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts, and through them, I got connected to the Harvard Synapse Buddy Program with you and Tanisha.
Thank you so much for sharing. So could you tell me a little bit about like the support groups and I guess different types of therapies that you've been through and how they may have helped you?
Well, the support groups have been unbelievably positive for me, and they've helped me. I've learned a lot. I've learned with you kids. Whoops, sorry, called you kids again. Yeah. The support groups have been great. I feel very fortunate that I had my traumatic brain injury in 2019, because a lot of people in the support groups have had them in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they treated them very differently. They didn't even know what they were, so they weren't able to help them. So the support groups are fantastic because you have people with this storehouse of decades of knowledge of what works, what doesn't work, what doctors are good, what doctors are not as good. what type of therapies are good, and like I take notes. But it's been fantastic. Um, they have something, Journey Self Healing Through Art, that they do every Monday, and they do different things. And one of the benefits of having a traumatic brain injury is that is that I'm open to trying things that I would never try before. Like I had never painted anything other than, walls in a house. And we had a paint and sip one evening, and I did my first painting. And I would never have tried that before because I consider myself a very unartistic person. And I would not have bothered. Um, and I found that coloring is good for your brain. I found that coloring, because the support groups are fantastic, but they sometimes also bring up stuff. People are struggling so much. Different people are struggling with different things, and their households are set up in certain ways. Some people have more support than others. And lots of times after the end of a meeting, I color for a while, and that just calms me down and soothes me. So they've been fantastic. And people, I've learned that having blurry vision all the time is common. I was very judgmental about the fact that I get really tired in the early afternoons, and have even fallen asleep. And my mother started doing that in her mid 80s, and I'm only 69. So, I thought, wow, what's wrong with you? Turns out that that's very common, that people take naps, and a lot of people take multiple naps. And so that was good to let go of that judgment. So, and other things you can try, and or if you stumble and stuff, and you can say, well, I don't really care, I have a traumatic brain injury, so what, so I screwed up. I think you develop more of a relaxation about, a lot of technicalities about um, expectations of how you should be, because you're not. And the other thing I've noticed is that I used to talk about the old me, and the me now. And a lot of other people in the support groups do the same thing. There's a big shift. But there's so many people that have risen beyond the brain injury, and have developed these incredible skills that are very artistic in all different ways, whether it's painting or drawing or writing or photography. It's just fantastic. So it doesn't have to be like your life ends, but you do have to put a lot of adaptations in place. And since finding your little Virtuosos project, and looking at music therapy, I then looked up music therapy for people with traumatic brain injury. And there's a lot of information out there for that. And there's also, at yesterday's support group meeting, one of the women there is from North Carolina, and she was telling us about this man who was like in bed, couldn't talk, couldn't walk, and through music and his family supporting him to do the things he liked, he had a complete recovery. And they checked his brain out in the MRI, and yeah, the old damage was there, but his brain had made all these new pathways. So I'm hoping that music will help me do that, as well as also, like with art. I learned that drawing with your non-dominant hand helps the pathways between your eye and your brain develop. It helps you form new pathways. So I'm always looking for ways to maybe, work around my brain injury and get back some of the things that I have lost.
Yeah, for sure. I'm learning so much just hearing about, your story. It's really wonderful. Yeah, I wanted to ask about, I know you love nature. So could you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about, your hobbies, maybe with nature photography, or how nature has helped you, especially during this time?
Yeah. Well, I've always loved nature. And about maybe 15 years ago, I started trying to do a photographic bioinventory in Monroe. And so photographing all kinds of species, whether it's, well, first I started out with, birds and mammals, and I went on to plants, insects, snakes, whatever's out there is moving. That for me is my biggest loss since the traumatic brain injury, because the um, concussion specialist said I cannot fall again, that if I fall again, I could lose so much more than I have and not get any of it back. So I have to be super careful now when I'm out with the dogs. I have to spend a lot more time looking down to make sure that I'm not going to slip or fall. And I take ski poles out. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have sarcoidosis and a bunch of other things. But with the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but it affects your joints. So all of my muscles, ligaments, and tendons are um, hyperextensive. I'm double jointed. When I was a kid growing up, I was called double jointed. And then it's like this constant struggle from, what my physical body can do and what I need to do for my brain. And that's the thing that has been the most frustrating for me. And I found little adaptions that I do where I can, sit on a fallen log or boulder, or just lean up against a tree if I want to look around, because I like to look for birds and birds' nest. I photograph those. I also I love snakes. I like to photograph them. And so I've had to kind of chunk it down. So I can't, before my brain injury, I could be more at one with nature. I was aware of the wind and where there were birds, you could feel the wind, you could hear it when it's running, you can hear the river down below, you could hear rustle of animals. I can hear the dog's goat bells tingling and tinkling, and you can also look, you can hear bird fly by or see one go by or see their shadow. I can't do that anymore. And now I just finding more adaptations to deal with the limitations, and ever hopeful that some of these limitations will go away.
Thank you so much for sharing. So you had told me that you have had a bit of experience with music in the past as a musician growing up. So could you tell me a little bit about your story with music?
Sure. So when I was 8, I started taking clarinet lessons and started in an orchestra and stayed in the orchestra until junior high. And they had a marching band as well as an orchestra. So I was involved in that. So I played clarinet for 10 years. And my parents insisted that everybody had to, learn a musical instrument. So all 4 of us, my 2 sisters, my brother, and I all um, took lessons, and my brother stayed with it for a year. Hated it the whole time. The rest of us stayed with it for at least a decade. Um, and since connecting with you and going to your sites on YouTube, I have decided to get some kind of instrument again. So thinking about getting is like a kid's piano, and to do that, because that's also, since working with you and Tanisha in the Harvard Synapse program, I have through research found out that music can help repair your brain. So I'm gung-ho to try that. So I'm thinking of a small piano or a small organ, kids things to start. And I'm not going to be able to participate in any of the things that you folks put on. No, but I'm hoping that it'll create new pathways for the old brain. So I'm excited about doing that.
Mhm. That's wonderful. I'm really glad you were inspired to take up, another instrument. That's really great. Um, Yeah, could you tell me a little bit about, some of your favorite memories playing in orchestra and band?
I I love playing in an orchestra. I love um, just hearing all the other musicians around you, from first to fourth chair and all the various instruments. And it's, when you come together, it's like making magic, when it all falls into place. And it's a real team effort. Everybody's got to hit the right note at the right moment in order for it to work. And when it does, it's just great. And some of my favorite memories are hanging out in the band room, in the music department when the musical director was not there. And we would try each other's instruments. And that was really fun, trying everybody's different instruments and finding out, wow, this is much harder than it looks, and other things that we did was like do races. I've told you I really enjoyed the Irish washerwomen. And it's what's one of the things that's amazing about music, which as a musician, is that, it's just like muscle memory. Like you can play faster than you can read notes. And that, once you get this down, it's like instinct, and it just takes over. And it's just a matter of how fast can my muscles move. And that was great fun. um, uh, so those are some of my favorite movies. And in the marching band Memorial Day, that was always fun too. And also on the football field, I did like when they did the different configurations when we'd have to march in and out, and we would form letters, or I don't remember, it was so long ago, but that I remember that we formed different patterns. And I enjoyed that. It was something almost like, so precise about, you're in your little blue uniform with your gold epaulets and your little white gloves, and you're going marching around and Memorial Day parade. And it was fun. I actually just started researching it this week, since we spoke on Sunday. I attend as many brain injury support groups meetings as I can. And so it was one earlier this week that I learned that this man completely recovered, and music had a big part of it. And since then, I went on the internet and found there's all of this, neurologically, peer-reviewed science documents about how, they can prove that music can help uh, you improve from brain injuries. It seems to be, from the part that I can read, is that it's about creating new pathways, more working around your injury than actually repairing the damage. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. And interestingly, this morning I went on to YouTube and went under search and did music therapy for brain injuries, and they found out that something what they call binaural beats or something. And I had looked into those earlier on when COVID started and the administration was wild, to be calming, because I had started meditating in the early 70s, and I really like meditating with music. So Georgia Kelly is one of my favorites. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's a harpist. Yeah. So if your little Virtuoso Project could do some of her stuff, that would be great. I used to meditate to her music all the time.
Is that your favorite music to listen to, or do you also have other genres that you like to listen to as well?
Well, there are other things that I have done to survive the COVID. Jesse Colin Young, and the band music from the Big Pink, and Jonathan Edwards, and and Leonard Cohen, just Cat Stevens, people that I was listening to when I was in my 20s, teens and 20s, going back to that. Yeah, so those are I pretty much like everything except for heavy metal. I have always had problems with heavy metal. I was like that pre-brain injury. It's worse now, post-brain injury. And music creates a vibration that I think resonates with our cellular body, and I think also with our spiritual body. So I think that it makes sense to me that music will be so therapeutic in healing our brain, because organisms are designed to heal. So I'm ever hopeful, uh, but I don't have unrealistic expectations. I'm not going to ride a bicycle anytime soon.
Never know. What has been your like biggest takeaway from this time?
And the pandemic, for me, has brought new opportunities because of Zoom, and YouTube, and I didn't know that like schools, there are colleges that you can go and you can, you know, learn more things. You can mostly, I tend to look at the environmental studies things. So I look about birds and ecosystems where I haven't been, like down in Florida, or, but you could learn, if you had an interest, you could learn other things. So I think there's been some positives about it. I think it helped the environment a lot because pollution went down. And I think there's been some good things have come out of that, where they're going to keep streets closed off so that human traffic can go up and down without worrying, because all those people with phones who look at their phones and walk out into traffic, and because they are always looking at their phones. So I think things are getting better in some ways. I think it's an opportunity. I think COVID-19 has been an opportunity for us to stop, look at what is working, what we could make work better, and what doesn't work, and how we need to totally restructure things, especially around social and economic and gender and racial equality. So I guess that's my take on the pandemic.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here with me and being able to chat a little bit about your story. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. I always enjoyed chatting with you, Anjali.